Hello and welcome to Wilson v. Wilson. I'm Jess Wilson.
I'm Peter Wilson.
And this is a show where we talk about news, politics, pretty much anything that's happening lately, sometimes campus news. We're going to go ahead and start off with Vice Versa, which is where I read Peter some headlines and he gives me his reaction, quick reaction, because we can't go on forever. Okay. So I have 5 for you today. The first one is from the World Wildlife Fund, and it is troubling news for monarch butterfly populations.
Is that just the headline?
That's the headline.
That's tough. Plant some milkweed, people.
Plant some
Come on, get it going.
I'll pull up the article and I'll tell you what the troubling news is.
I like monarchs, but I don't see them as much.
Yeah.
That's probably the troubling news.
Yeah. Indeed. I mean, my mom and I have a butterfly garden out front, so we plant a bunch of butterfly and bug-friendly plants in front of our home. Partially to attract them and partially just to try to support them. Yeah,
and they usually look good too.
I feel like that's something everybody can do is just plant some friendly plants.
Plant some cool plants.
Put out a really, really shallow dish of sugar water. Has to be really shallow because they can drown real easy.
Don't drown them off.
Like a sponge with sugar water in it. That's how I used to feed my butterflies. Fun fact: I raise butterflies every now and then.
They make hummingbird feeders, not butterfly feeders.
What?
Hummingbird feeders? You seen those?
Oh yeah.
Those are cool.
Yeah. Have you ever had one before?
I think we did. Well, no, I don't think we ever have. We put bird feeders out because we like the birds.
Yeah. Let's see.
No.
Oh, yes.
We got a butterfly bush or something in the backyard, but it is very sickly.
Oh.
Oh, yeah.
Well, hold on. Give me 1 sec to get this article because I'm having trouble finding it where I found it before. But this is just more information about monarch butterflies. They were declared endangered last summer. Which is not good.
No, it is not.
Monarch butterflies.
Yeah. That feels like one of the ones that's like, we can probably do the most for that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. The presence of monarch butterflies in their wintering habitat dropped by 22% in the last year. That's a troubling news.
That's not good. I'd be curious what the trends are. Like if occasionally they just drop and then go back up. Like, probably not.
Not typically.
I'm going to guess.
No. As the butterfly girl, I can tell you, no, that's not normal. That's actually really, really
22%
bad.
is a lot. Yeah.
We'll have our second one. This one's just a fun one to bring the mood back up after the sad news about the butterflies from CNN. 2 inmates were found at an IHOP in Virginia after escaping by digging a hole with tools made from a toothbrush and a metal object, officials say.
That's pretty cool.
I gotta appreciate that they just went to an IHOP.
I would have chose Waffle House because that feels right.
That man lives at Waffle House.
Actually, I haven't been in like a week.
A tragedy.
Actually, I haven't been since before spring break.
That's actually surprising.
Yeah, I am going through hash brown withdrawals.
You've got to go back to the Waffle House.
No. No. But good for IHOP. They're getting that.
Good for IHOP?
No, okay, here's the thing. Is that not a good ad idea? People break out of prison to go to your restaurant?
I mean.
If you're going to break out of prison, make it a funny story. Or just don't get found. But if you're going to get found at a late night diner. That's...
Like Waffle House?
Like Waffle House or IHOP. IHOP is just trying to be fancy. And Waffle House is like, we gave up years ago. Respect.
What do you think about the escaped by digging a hole?
Yeah, that's real Shawshank Redemption stuff.
That's it's iconic, I gotta say.
I didn't know you could do that anymore. I thought...
I don't know the details of how, but I'm frankly impressed.
Yeah, I'm really curious what level of security does it say?
I just have the headline.
That's crazy.
Just the headline.
Okay,
for you.
I respect that though.
You
dig a hole. That's a real classic story. You dig a hole, you go get some food.
I don't know what they did.
I wonder if they were planning to go back. They're like, we'll get some IHOP, we'll get back in there.
They're just going for pancakes. I don't know. I have no idea. I hope they did something that's not really bad.
Did they get served at the IHOP is the question. Because if
don't know.
IHOP, Waffle House would have served them. I'm just saying. Waffle House would have been like, you're in orange, you have chains on. Typical.
Yeah. Well, I doubt they would have made it to the IHOP still in orange and chains.
Yeah, it must have been lower security.
I don't know. Or they changed clothes after they got out.
That would have been the smart move.
I don't know what they did, and I'm going to preface with that, but I hope they did something, like, not that bad.
Yeah, I hope they're, like, not terrible people. They just, like,
yeah, I hope
something
it's, like, just fine. Like, maybe it was shoplifting or, like...
I hope they didn't, like...
They had some marijuana
assault
or
somebody
something.
or something.
Yeah, like,
you know?
I hope it was really minor stuff so that I can cheer them on in their next attempt.
Yeah, it's like, hopefully they can make it to, I don't know, Olive Garden next time.
Yeah, I don't know what they did. And if they did something horrible,
it's less funny.
I don't want them to escape and go to the IHOP again. But
they robbed an IHOP.
Oh man, they're just going back.
Like, wait, it's you.
Oh no. Bringing the mood back down. NBC News: deadly fungal infection spreading at an alarming rate.
I watched a TV show about that.
And fun fact, one of the news releases from like one of the...
It's not a Last of Us infection because that's not real.
No, literally they were like, this infection does not cause zombies.
What a horrible thing to have to put in a public health release.
But it is killing the elderly, so...
That's not good.
Yeah.
It's mostly spreading to hospitals.
Yeah, in long-term care facilities.
That's rough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not good.
Yeah, and
fungal infections are one of the scarier things going on. That's not good news.
Yeah, I will say I did hear that from some experts talking about there's already work in the pipeline. There was before the infection started. There was work being done to come up with treatment for it. So
I feel like I've heard enough about fungal infections over the last, like even before COVID. I was like, probably somebody's doing something about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like you always, and this might be my Ohio perspective where I live in the little Ohio bubble, but I feel like you always hear like those crazy stories from Florida or Georgia about like crazy skin-eating fungus, bacteria, whatever. But I'm not going to lie, I hadn't heard much about fungal infections before.
Yeah. I'd read a few things during COVID that were like, the next one's going to be fungus.
Oh, really?
You know, yeah. So, and yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I stock my car better every day.
Stock it with what?
You got to have your apocalypse kit.
Your apocalypse kit? Does that include... Fun fact, he keeps a sledgehammer in his car,
you don't need to be telling them that.
Is that part of your apocalypse
No, that's my
kit?
road rage kit.
For sure.
Not actually. Sure. I don't actually do road rage ever. I just give him a thumbs down and
This is what happens when Peter doesn't get his Waffle House, is he threatens us with violence.
I didn't threaten anybody with violence. Violins.
If you're not watching the footage, you probably just missed Peter giving the side eye as he said, "I don't threaten violence."
It's a promise.
Okay,
sure. What's the next headline?
For sure.
Before I commit more crimes.
The next one, also from NBC News. Xi Putin pledged new world order as Chinese leader leaves Russia.
Well, that seems like trash news. I'm probably a little more optimistic about that than in terms of it not being a thing that'll work well together. I think at some point China and Russia are going to like each other a lot less than they do now.
Yeah. And this is my thing of, I don't understand how anyone can look at someone who's leading the charge to murder a whole bunch of people and steal a whole bunch of children, which I don't know.
How that could be either of those two.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about Putin specifically in this case because he did just have a warrant for his arrest filed in the international court. Not that that's going to actually do anything.
Yeah.
But I don't know how you can look at someone and be like that and be like, we are going to be the world's new great power. We're going to spread our influence.
I mean,
everywhere.
I don't understand. China also has camps.
I know. I'm aware. They're also doing awful things. I'm talking about not like from any perspective. I'm talking about as a human person.
Oh yeah, it's hard to look at that and be like, that's a good thing.
Yeah, be like, oh, you're stealing kids? Sick, let's work together. I don't get it. Like, I get it.
Yeah, no, it makes geopolitically, it makes sense because I'd say that's the two countries that the Western world is most concerned about, would be Russia and China. Actually, not just the Western world. Most of the world.
Pretty much everyone.
Everybody that's not
even
Russian.
People in China.
India kind of gets along with Russia and kind of gets along with China, which is interesting.
Depends on the day.
India's in an interesting position right now.
Yeah.
For a lot of reasons, because they're, I think, soon they are the most populous country in the world.
I think so. Yeah.
Or they're going to be soon because they're growing way faster than China is because they didn't say, hey, you can only have one kid.
And then
10,
this is something that I've watched documentaries on, is that some of the poorer areas of India don't have equal access to birth control and education about reproductive like control, that sort of thing. Because if you look at the studies, the more education grows, especially for women,
the more the birth rate drops.
Exactly, the birth rate drops when education grows. And that's like, there was,
And China just said, we're going to short circuit the education and just force people to not have more than one kid.
Policy
they said, we'll just force abortions. Like, that's a good plan as a country, which...
Well, it was more of a, if you look at the policy, it was more of just really hefty fines.
Yeah.
For multiple children, which is pretty bad because that can force a family into destitution. If they have to pay a whole lot of money for having a second child, if you don't have the education to control that.
Yeah. And it can effectively lead to that the government is forcing you to not have a kid or to abort a kid, which I think, which is not right. And
I did want to touch on that because we haven't really talked about abortion on the show before. I am very much pro-choice. Do whatever you got to do, girly pop. Peter does not agree with me.
Yeah, I do not
on that. But for what it's worth, I think it should be the choice of the person who is pregnant, and not anybody.
And the
else's
Chinese
choice.
government saying you can't have a kid is not giving them any choice in that matter.
I'm not into that. For the record, I'm not like, abort everything, abort all of it.
If it moves,
get rid of it. No, because there are people who do want to have babies. There are people who do want to be pregnant, or there are people who may not necessarily want to have become pregnant in the first place, but make that decision to not abort the fetus, and that's a decision I respect. But I'm also of the mind of, if you don't want to be pregnant, I don't think you should have to be. If cheetahs can have abortions, I think that we should be able to have them too, personally. Fun fact.
Wait, cheetah abortions?
Yeah. That's a fun fact for you. Cheetahs can have abortions at will if a pregnant mother cheetah is in danger or stressed out, or there's some kind of environmental circumstance which leads her to be like, it's a really bad idea to have babies right now, or to be impeded in any way by a pregnancy. They can choose to have an abortion.
Interesting.
Pretty sure there's a couple of different species of animals that can do that. I believe it's cheetahs. It's one of the spotted cats, but I believe it's cheetahs.
Yeah.
Yes. But, for the record, abortions are a lot more natural than some people would like you to believe.
I don't know if we want to take our moral law from cheetahs, though.
That's not what I'm saying. It's moral laws. I'm saying if a cheetah can have one, why do I have less autonomy than a cheetah?
Well, humans can't naturally.
With herbs, yeah. You can do a lot of stuff. Humans also can't naturally go 50 miles per hour. We got cars. We figured it out.
But I think that, okay, how should I phrase this? From the perspective of, I think the abortion debate has weirdly gotten, since Roe v. Wade has been overturned, the tendency by some state legislatures was, okay, now let's pass these laws that have no exceptions, like even for the health of the mother, like even for the woman might die, which is bonkers, in my opinion. And secondly, some of the reason for many abortions is if because the mother does not feel that she can care for the child properly. Sometimes that's because the father is out of the picture, doesn't want to be in the picture. And I'm of the belief that if you, I don't think that it's right to abort a child. I think there are times when it is, I think that's a human being, and I don't think you should just get rid of it. But if we just go with that and we say we're not going to support that mother, I think there's both things. If you say that, you need to be ready to care for that mother. But I think you can't just say, just because there's not an adequate support system, we can do away with the child. So the thing that has been lacking in a lot of the legislation has been saying here, there's two people involved in that child existing now. They should have, as the father should have just as much responsibility as the mother has for that kid until it turns 18. Even if the father doesn't want to be in that kid's life at all, that is your responsibility financially. However, even if the father shouldn't be in the kid's life, they should be basically paying for that child to be taken care of until they turn 18, right? And that needs to be a firmer, more solid thing, because I know child support laws tend to be badly enforced, poorly enforced, hard to enforce. And I know it's not an easy question, and I think it gets treated that way a lot by both groups, really, in very different ways. But you've got to be willing to say, we're going to stop at nothing to make sure this kid is taken care of, and that it's not just this woman being left completely to take care of this child on their own. And I think also, I don't know if you've ever looked into like how ridiculously weird it is and expensive it can be to adopt a kid. I think there should be lots of oversight over who get adoption needs that is one of the things where it's like, that's tricky to look at and say.
And I have my own personal issues with adoption. And because I don't know.
There's rightful concerns.
I don't know if you knew this about adoption, but regardless of the age of the child being adopted, when they are adopted, their birth records, their birth certificate, all of their papers and documents and records are changed to imply or state that their adoptive parents are their birth parents, essentially. Mm. So a child who's maybe 16 lived a happy life with their parents, and then something has happened to the point where they can no longer live with their parents, whether someone has passed away, or there was some horrific kind of situation where a parent became addicted to, like painkillers with the opioid addiction, anything like that. If they're adopted by a new family, all of their records erased, all of their connection to their blood relations. Yeah. So, and I think that's a issue in the way the adoption system works. Yeah. I think we should personally move more towards a legal guardianship situation, which is where the child would retain their name, their documents, their records, all of that. It's just that they have a legal guardian who's someone else now. But that's just kind of an aside about the adoption. Because that's the additional thing, is there's a lot of issues with foster care and adoption. When I wrote a paper about this when I was like 15 or 16, and at that time there was about 600,000 kids in the American foster system. Yeah. That has more than likely grown since then.
600,000?
600,000. I don't know the current rates.
Imagine COVID probably didn't help that situation.
Yeah, it's probably grown since then. But the rates of abuse in foster care are horrific.
Yeah.
Whether it's physical abuse, mental and emotional abuse. A big one, unfortunately, is also medication abuse. There's a lot of foster kids who end up taking, like, crazy psychotropic medications because they have behavioral issues because they are traumatized by the adoption system. So
yeah,
I do appreciate that you are of the mind of, like, if you're going to have the child, there needs to be a system set up in place to take care of them beyond that point. I appreciate that you're not just like the give birth to them, figure it out kind of person, because that doesn't work. Yeah. And it doesn't work in any way, shape, or form. And it's the additional thing for me of, I hear your point of that you consider a fetus to be a human child, and that you are not comfortable with abortion because of that. Conversely, I would say, if you and your future wife don't want to have an abortion, that's a choice for you. But I don't want you making that choice for me. You know what I'm saying? Because I understand your concern with human life. I get that. I don't share it. I think life begins at birth. Yeah. So there's a fundamental kind of difference there. But additionally, right, like if you look at my medical records.
It says you were born on the day you were born.
No. That's not what I'm saying at all.
Okay, yeah, sorry. I'll let you actually make a point.
Yeah. If you look at my medical records, you would see that I have like a mild anemia deficiency that's chronic. I was really sick when I was little. Other than that, on paper, there's nothing wrong with me.
Yeah.
Knowing me as a person, being my friend, like having hung out, you know that I have stuff majorly wrong with my joints. And this is additionally because of the way women's healthcare works in the U.S. And really the world, there's just not enough research into conditions that affect primarily women. That's a known thing. There have been studies that show that doctors take women, and especially black women's pain, less seriously than men's pain. So there's just like there's a difference in the level of concern for women's health issues. So what's wrong with me is something that is more frequent in women. Thus, there's not a lot of research into it. And thus, it's really hard to get an official diagnosis or have anything on paper that would get me treatment. Or there's actually not really treatment at all for what's wrong with me. And I'm saying this to explain that if I were to ever get pregnant, it'd be a decision I make to have an abortion. Because, one, going through childbirth bears a high risk of killing me. Going through with pregnancy bears a high risk of causing irreparable damage to my body. And the likelihood of any biological child I have inheriting the medical conditions that cause me chronic and severe pain is highly likely. I understand your ethical standpoint of that's a human child to you, and you don't think it's right to end that life. And this is getting on the border of some problematic stuff. I'm not saying that it should be mandated that if there's anything wrong with a fetus that it should be aborted. I'm saying it's an ethical decision that I would make for myself, that's not something I'm comfortable with, because I know what I suffer with, and I don't want someone else to suffer with that, especially if it's not a choice they can make whether or not to suffer with that. And that's going more widespread with that, because not everybody, it's not always a medical issue, right? Sometimes it is a personal decision of there was some horrific reason how the fetus was conceived, and they don't want to have any part of that. Or they cannot financially, emotionally, physically provide for a child at that time, and they're not ethically okay with putting a child into a foster system where they'll likely be abused. Or really any number of reasons. Even just going through pregnancy can be really traumatic for some people. Even if it was a wanted pregnancy, it can still be extremely traumatic. It can still have irreparable harm to someone's body. And that's my point with saying that you look at me, there's nothing wrong with me on paper.
Yeah.
But you know, and I know, that there are things wrong with me that would make pregnancy and childbirth hell or death for me. So I don't think that Jim, who lives down the street, who knows nothing about me, should be able to look at me and be like, oh, well, you look perfectly capable of having a kid to me. Or to look at me on paper and say, oh, yeah, I don't see anything really wrong with you. You can't have an abortion. It's that point of, I don't think someone else should be able to make that decision for me because they don't know my situation and they don't know what I'm living with or why I would make that decision. There's an argument that a lot of people use where they say that, oh, well, there's all these women using abortions as birth control. No. Fun fact, there's a study done, I can't remember when it was. I was like 13 or 14 when I first found this study, and it was a year or two old by then, so it's a little out of date. But that study found that 70% of the women who'd had abortions in their study pool were either married or already had a child. So these are not women who are using abortion just because they're loose women. They're going out, screwing everybody on the street. Not that I have a problem with that. Go off, girl. We don't slut shame on this show. But my point in saying that is that there's a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of stereotypes about women who have abortions and the reasons that they have them. And I need everyone, honestly, to understand that the decision to have an abortion is not one taken lightly by anyone who's ever had one. It's not something callously tossed about. It's not something considered lightly. It is a hard decision that every woman who's ever had an abortion has had to make. And for a lot of women, a decision that was traumatic. And I don't think that we should shame them or threaten them or stop women from making those decisions, because ultimately it's their choice. You know what I'm saying?
I do
hear
what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah. And that's the other thing is I would not stop you and your wife, your future wife. He's not married, by the way. Cat's right here. I would not stop you, from either of you, from making that decision of, even if it was an unwanted pregnancy at the time, of we're not going to have an abortion because that's our belief. But I would ask, conversely, that you give me that respect back to say that you're not going to control my choice.
To me, the crux of the issue is if I can't look at that and say that if that's a child, right? Then there's not a reason good enough. Because there are good reasons, right? But if that's a child, there isn't, like, there's heartbreaking reasons. And like a lot of those things are things that's like, this is a long-term problem that needs to have, like you were talking about, lack of investment in women's health, right? Right, lack of research into women's health problems.
Yeah,
right?
And I'll grant you that. If there was the foundation there, if there was the treatment for me, if there was a solution to my medical issues, if there was a solution to the reasons why that I've decided personally for myself that I'm not ever going to have a biological child, maybe it'd be a consideration that I make.
Yeah.
But that's not an option for me.
Yeah. But I still look at it and I say, if that's a child, when it is a child, which I think is well before 9 months. And then I don't think there's a reason good enough. And I just, it quite simply, I just can't, like, it's not that there aren't, it's not that it's not that it can, is sometimes, like, leads into a horrible circumstance. It's that if that's a child and that child is dying, then that's not a choice that, like...
Well, I'll ask you a question then. From your perspective, I've already said where I think life begins. From your perspective, where do you think life begins? Are you familiar with the trimesters?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, conception 1, 2, 3, somewhere in between, where do you think life begins?
I believe heartbeat is 7 weeks. 6 weeks. It's a little hard to go later than that. I
will give you a bit of information, and then I will deliver you, this is a version of the trolley problem, and ask your thought about it. So, a fetus cannot survive outside of the womb until somewhere in the third trimester. Did you say 1?
No.
The first, no.
The record is, I believe, 20 weeks.
Yes, yeah. That's pretty early. Somewhere around 23 is where the point of, like, you can start surviving on your own with medical intervention at that point. But is when a fetus can survive outside the womb. Mm-hmm. So let me put it this way. This is this trolley problem. So you have gone in for a doctor's appointment. And run-of-the-mill doctor's appointment, you're just going in for a checkup because you got a cough, it's whatever, right? So the doctor comes in and says, oh, you're fine, it's just a cold, you'll be okay, but I have some news for you. So let me bring in Rachel. This is Rachel. This is also called the violinist problem. Rachel is a violinist who has a rare medical condition. The only solution, the only way to save Rachel's life is if you and Rachel are hooked up via blood tubes and giving a constant blood transfusion between the two of you for 9 months. You two will be connected by the tubes for 9 months. So I'm just going to hook you up right now, and then you can go. Mm-hmm. What's your immediate response?
It's going to be a heck of an inconvenient
the doctor
9
and Rachel.
Months.
Yeah, inconvenient 9 months, right? Yeah. You have also not been asked if you want to help Rachel.
This is true.
Yeah. You're just being popped up. And while the doctor's coming at you to plug you in, you go, whoa. I'd never met her. Is there not anyone else who can get hooked up to Rachel? And they're like, well, we already brought Rachel in, so it's you now. And by the way, while you're hooked up to Rachel, you'll probably experience a few side effects. You'll be throwing up. You will probably have some really serious pain. You might not be able to stand up sometimes. You'll crave a lot of weird foods. And it'll just all around be awful for you, probably, with the symptoms. And then it'll take a few months for you to recover after. And you'll just have to chill for those 3 months while you're recovering.
Yeah.
So we're going to hook you up to Rachel.
It wouldn't be fair, but I don't think it'd be right to let Rachel die.
Sure. And that's your point of view. But do you think it's okay that without asking you, they're just like, let's get hooked up to Rachel?
I don't think it's... I don't think it's a good thing, but that doesn't mean that Rachel should die.
Sure. And that's your perspective on that. I also don't think Rachel could die. I think there's a difference between an adult person who's already lived and a fetus who has not lived until 23 weeks, could not live outside the womb.
Yeah.
So that's the thing of Rachel.
Yeah.
Is the issue. And it's less, I think, the, hey, let's hook Rachel up to you and save Rachel's life. And it's more of the, I'm not giving you a choice, whether you want that or not. And for some people, being up to Rachel could kill you instead. For some people, being hooked up to Rachel for the next 9 months could ruin your life. And for that time being, maybe you have to financially support Rachel and you can't afford to do that, and that puts you on the street. You and Rachel on the street, even if you wanted to be hooked up to Rachel.
Or Rachel dies.
Or Rachel dies anyways. And to go on the point that I was saying with that, when I asked you when life begins in your perspective. Abortions that occur beyond the 3rd trimester, which is when the fetus could survive outside the womb on its own, even really beyond 20 weeks, which is the earliest that a fetus ever survived, as you said that's the record, right? Those are not typically wanted abortions. Those, and they're technically...
Are frequently medical interventions of some sort.
They're technically still called abortions even if the fetus has died in utero.
Yeah.
So they're a very small percentage of the abortions that take place. And they're not wanted abortions. There was one of the Duggar daughters had a procedure which is used for late-term abortions. And the fetus at that point had already died, so there's a bit of like a language disconnect between what...
The laws are not up with...
What she had was not
terms.
an abortion in the way that we're thinking of it as like the ending of the termination of a pregnancy of a fetus that was like going to continue.
If Rachel dies, you should unhook her, is what that is.
Yes. So it was the same procedure, just a different purpose. But so they're still medically they're still called abortions. So abortions that occur beyond that point are not wanted abortions. Most people don't get abortions even close to that point. They happen 1st trimester, very beginning of the 2nd trimester. And the issue with the 6-week point is, so depending on how long a menstrual cycle is, it can be 3 weeks is really short, 4 weeks is a lot longer. So if you get pregnant right at the end of your period, you may not know that you're pregnant until at least 5 weeks after.
When you've missed the next one.
And that would be when you've missed the next one. And a lot of people miss periods for whatever reason. They're stressed out, they didn't eat enough, they're sick. There's a lot of different reasons why you can miss a period. Some people may not see that. Maybe they did use birth control, maybe they did use condoms and they failed. So they missed that period and they're like, oh, it's whatever, or they have different kinds of birth control that mean they don't have periods, so they don't know they missed anything at all. Go to the doctor because you're not feeling well, and suddenly you find out that you're 7 or 8 weeks pregnant. And there's now, in certain states where there's a 6-week ban, like Ohio with the heartbeat bill, there's nothing you can do and you didn't even know. And that's if you, now, like you'd usually start to know at 3 or 4 weeks, like you'd feel it. Problem with that is that pregnancy is not counted from the date of conception unless you're completely certain. It's counted from your last period. So if you get pregnant right before your period, still have a normal period, go through to the next one, they're counting from this period. So again, you're 7 to 8 weeks in and you didn't even know you were pregnant. So like to that point of if life doesn't start in your perspective until that point of the heartbeat, that's still too early for anyone to know. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, but...
And the fetus at that point is still this big.
I think there's two things in that. Just because the child can't survive outside of the womb doesn't, if that's a child, that doesn't, like, there's a reason.
It ain't thinking.
Yeah.
I'll explain why I think it begins later is there's not even thoughts until later. So I don't, like, you'd say a heartbeat is a classical sign of life. At that point, a fetus doesn't even have all of its organs. A lot of things have a heartbeat in a way that we wouldn't necessarily classify as alive. If you listen to them through electrodes, some plants even technically have like heartbeats per se. So I don't think a heartbeat in particular is a sign of life. I could be persuaded earlier to the point I wouldn't change my mind about abortion and choice. Yeah. But I could be persuaded that life begins before that survival outside the womb period to maybe when there are a full set of organs. Yeah. Or at least enough organs to like separate it out from other things like plants. But at that point it is still just a bunch of cells. And whether or not it has a beating heart doesn't mean it's alive. There are corpses that have heartbeats for a few after it's like dead.
But we do know what it is. It's not a corpse. We know that.
Yeah, we do.
We know
I'm not saying that we don't know what it is. I'm saying that a heartbeat isn't necessarily a sign that it's alive.
But again, we look at it, we know it is a baby. We know it is a human baby.
It will eventually come out and be a baby. It's not a baby yet.
So it transforms into a baby as it leaves the womb.
As it grows, sure.
So.
Because I wouldn't say a seedling is a tree. You get what I'm saying?
You could argue a seedling is a tree.
No, it's a seedling.
Yeah, but...
You don't want to argue plants with me. That's the one thing. I have like 90-something plants.
That is taking it to a different arena, which is not
a seedling
where it is.
Isn't a... That's what I... No, I'm not making the... Because you're kind of going at the straw man of like, oh, it magically transforms at the vagina. No. But it doesn't. It's a process of growth like anything else. Like a calf, it's like a baby cow, but it grows into a full size. Like a calf is not a steer. It grows into a steer.
Yeah.
But so, same cells, but you wouldn't classify it the same.
A child is not an adult. Like, yes, but...
Child's not an adult.
But it's still human.
It's human cells to a certain point.
But it's human cells forming a baby.
Eventually, yes. But at that point, it's just still human cells. It's like stem cells. They can be grown into whole organs and stuff, but when you first get them, still cells.
When do we stop just being cells? That gets into honestly a philosophical question.
Point of life. That's what
which is really I think the crux of the good faith argument about abortion is, when is it a child? Because I don't think very many people are saying, there's not very many people saying that that before there's a... Okay. Well, I don't think very many people... Nobody... I've not heard people... Well, I've heard a couple people, because there's always a couple people for any view. You can always find a couple people for any view who are like, well, actually, I think it was some dude was like, you can kill babies because they're not useful yet. Yeah.
I don't think that was a legitimate argument. I'm not gonna lie to you.
They were not a legitimate person, and I'm not saying that.
Are you talking about a modest proposal?
No, it was not that. I think it was one of the more extreme crackpot troll who's like, he's serious, but nobody takes him seriously, you know? Right? But to me, it's like, that is the question, and I don't think it's as, Like, I don't think it's this, oh, it can't be a baby until it's born. I don't think that really makes sense. And I can't look at it and say, if that's a child at 6 weeks, I don't think you can kill that at 6 weeks. And that's what it boils down to. And honestly, to me at least, it's like, that's a child. That's not something that we should, we really didn't get to the policies of it, did we? Yeah.
No. We gotta lay the ground rules first. We've never talked about this on the show.
What time is it?
How long have we been going?
Ryan pointed at his watch like 10 minutes ago. It's
3:35. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We got a while to. Maybe we'll talk about the policies next time.
Yeah. There's so many of them, and some of them are.
But this is just the basis of.
And
I guess this is a good example of you can disagree with someone without yelling and screaming at each other.
Yeah, we'll yell and scream next time.
Yeah. I'll yell and scream at you as soon as the camera's turned off. You watch. He'll bring out a sledgehammer because he hasn't had his Waffle House. Speaking of which, Ryan let me know that you don't have road rage. You just run red lights. So, good to know.
Not on purpose.
Good to know. But yeah, it's just... so I guess the point, what we were discussing and getting at is that we have a fundamental difference in opinion of when life begins. Yeah. Which is a lot of the basis of abortion-related debate. And I do understand your point, and I appreciate that. My kind of inverse is just that you can have whatever opinion you want, but I don't think it should dictate other people in some ways. Which we do have to wrap the show up. We can keep going next time.
Is that just headlines? That was from a headline.
Yeah, we didn't even get through all the headlines, actually. We did not finish. Do you want to hear the last headline before we do our last segment? It's also a bummer. I'm not going to lie to you. Israeli minister says there's no such thing as a Palestinian people, inviting U.S. rebuke from CNN.
I think if... yes. Here we go from the complicated topic of abortion to the simple topic of the Middle East. Never.
Middle East. I think you mean specifically Israeli-Palestine relations.
You chose... That is... Golly. That's a lot.
None of these headlines were about abortion, by the way.
What was that? How did we get there? I don't even remember. Okay.
I have no idea.
Yeah. But no. Jeez, the Middle East. I don't have a line for that one.
I'll tell you the context is that he was like, they've had no... he's a Zionist, is his minister from Israel, and he's like, they have had there's been no Palestinian president. I don't know of a Palestinian state. They have no common culture. There's no such thing as a Palestinian people, which I vehemently disagree with. That sounds, I'm not going to lie, like genocidal rhetoric. I'm going to be honest. It sounds like that guy who went to CPAC and was like, we have to eliminate the trans people. So...
If there's no Palestinian people, who has Israel been shooting the rockets?
Yeah,
who's been shooting the rockets back? Like who's been doing that?
Who's been fighting? Who's been bombing? And yeah. So that was the last headline. Bit of a bummer. But to that I'd say the Palestinian people are a people.
And even if it's just random people, like even if it wasn't this tied together group of people, that doesn't make it...
They're still a people.
Like, they're still humans, regardless of whether they're, like...
They're still a people.
That's a whole mess.
And
the Iraq War's been going on for 20 years.
Yeah, and rolling back to where we started, human beings are human beings. Be kind to each other. God, I don't...
Yeah. Favorite state?
Favorite state. Yeah, that's our last segment for the day, which is, what is your favorite state other than the one you're from? I'm from Ohio,
I'm from Kentucky.
I can't say that, though Ohio would not be my favorite.
Kentucky might be.
And I told Peter before the show that I was going to give a controversial answer. My controversial answer is that the one that should have better representation and I think should be a state, Puerto Rico.
Oh, okay.
I think the Puerto Rican people deserve better. but within the confines of your question, that is a tough question, honestly. And I would probably say Hawaii. I've never been.
But it seems nice.
I would love... No, that's not why I picked it. I would love to visit and, like, pay respect to the land because it's a beautiful, beautiful land. But also more so because I really respect the spirit of the people of Hawaii, the native folks of Hawaii who live there and have been working very hard to defend their home from water shortages and corporations and tourists and all of that crap. I hope y'all win, and I hope you kick all of the tourists out. Godspeed, Peter.
I think I'm going to go Montana.
I respect that. That feels like a very Peter answer.
Yeah. Now, I was close to saying Washington, because Washington is great, but Montana is big. It's called Big Sky Country for a reason. Gorgeous all of the time, even the parts that are boring. It's interesting. You meet a lot of interesting people up there. Some really, really pretty spots. And you can just kind of, like, sometimes you'll be out on the highway and you won't see anybody in any direction. You're like, oh, there's a cow. That's cool. Or a train. I love Montana. America's kind of great. It's just a cool country in terms of how much land there is, how many different people there are that are here, and, like, how you don't have to, like, you can go somewhere and meet these people who live a very different life from you and are interesting people, and you can, hang out in the desert or be up in the mountains, and it's just explore if you're from America, explore your country, get to meet some people. It'll probably make you feel better than learning about them online, because usually that doesn't show anybody's best side. Yeah, I love Montana. I love flyover country, so to speak. Oh, it's great. People are missing out.
That feels like a very Peter Wilson answer.
I could have named, like, Wyoming. Wyoming's awesome. Nebraska, you go up in that northwestern section of Nebraska, it's gorgeous. And there's forests up there. You wouldn't think Nebraskan forest, but they have a state forest that is almost entirely planted. That's almost entirely human planted. And then they've got, like, bluffs, and it's pretty up there. And I mean, dude, the Great Plains, like, there's a reason people write songs about them. Amber Waves Grand and all that,
Yeah. Respect. Mr. Gumm?
You got a favorite state?
He's shaking his head at us. Come on, no favorite state? Not even. Oh, here he comes. Mr. Producer?
I don't travel enough, so, like, I don't really know if I have one.
Yeah.
But I had some family who lived in South Carolina. And I know that's, like, a very basic response, but my reasoning. So I am from Kentucky. I've born and raised here for the most part. South Carolina is Kentucky, but wealthy. That is, and with a beach. Okay. That is why.
Well,
like, when I went down there, like, I spent, like, 2 weeks down there, like a week on vacation in Myrtle, and then a week at my aunt and uncle's place in right next to Spartanburg. I cannot remember what it was called. But regardless, yeah, I, like, walked around. I ran cross country in high school, and this was in high school. So, like, I ran up and down the neighborhood and just got to talking to people. And if you would have, like, if I didn't know that I wasn't in Kentucky, I just would have assumed I was at another part of the state. Because, like, the atmosphere felt the same. Like when you travel and, like the what's the word I'm looking for here? Like, you can just tell, it's humid here.
Yeah.
Like, what am I thinking of here? Like, the moisture in the air is, like, it's and that's humidity. like a legit thing. Like, in Kentucky, it's very humid. And then the more south you go, like, I couldn't really tell a difference. Like, it felt, like, you wouldn't think, like, this was in the summer, too, the middle of the summer. And I, like, in South Carolina, between Kentucky and South Carolina, I didn't really feel that much of a difference. Home. Yeah. So, like, I mean, I don't travel a lot, but, like, I always said that if I was to live out of this state, I would probably pick South Carolina just because it is Kentucky. Same that Southern hospitality is legit, and I've learned to not take that for granted because the people here are just very nice, unless they have a reason not to be. But for the most part, people are very nice, and it's very similar down there, very much the same, and they are wealthy, with a beach.
For sure.
So yes,
For sure.
that is my reasoning. It's nothing like cool.
That's why the wealthy people moved there.
It's nothing. Yeah. It's nothing cool.
It's Kentucky,
but
with
it
the
is
beach.
it is my genuine response.
Yeah.
So
Respect.
the big SC.
Yeah. So that was our show today. I know we got a little distracted. We had other plans for things to talk about today, and we did not
I'm
talk
okay
about
with
that.
not talking about Trump.
For sure, we were going to talk about DeSantis and Trump and something.
Okay, can I say
else.
the very funny thing that DeSantis said about Trump?
Go ahead.
Okay, so Trump, people were like needling DeSantis to like poke that bear, kind of, and he said, or to talk about the, because Trump is there's a lot
About
of
Stormy
charges.
Daniels. Yeah.
There's a lot of swirlings and rumors and stuff. Anyway, and they asked him specifically about Stormy Daniels, and he said, "Well, I don't really know anything about paying hush money to porn stars." And I said, "This guy."
That's a shot. That's
Yeah.
That is indeed right there.
that's,
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice one to close it out.
Yeah.
That's going to be our show. I guess next time we'll talk more about what we think about different abortion and reproduction related policies in the U.S. in addition to hopefully some other more
Might talk Trump and
news.
DeSantis too.
Yeah.
We might talk. who
Well,
knows?
maybe he'll
I'm
be
sure-
indicted by then.
I'm
That's in 2 weeks.
Maybe he said he'd be arrested, so I don't think he will.
On
be.
Tuesday. We're already past
He said he'd
Tuesday.
be arrested, so I don't think he's going to jail.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's the end of our show today. Thank you so much for watching, and we will catch you next time. Bye.
See ya.